Okay, everyone. In this video, we're going to learn how to build up an Excel spreadsheet from scratch that is going to allow us to construct an annuity. The basic idea of which is it's not just about depositing an amount once, it's about depositing an amount repeatedly. We're going to look at it annually. So you're going to put an amount in at year 0, then you're going to re-put that amount in at year 1, then you're going to re-put that amount in at year 2, and so forth and so on and so forth and so on. Okay, so we're going to start like we usually do. I'm just going to click in here and type year. I'm going to do the Sean thing and center everything. All right, 0, 1, 2. Let's go out, I don't know, 20 years for starters. We can always go further if we need to. Okay, and then I'm going to put amount in annuity. Okay, make room for that. All right. Now, the kiddo that I'm reading about in this newspaper article deposited $1,500. So they save $1,500 a year. We're going to assume that they deposit all that money into their annuity each year. So they're going to deposit $1,500 here. Then that $1,500 is going to sit for a year, collect interest, and then they're also going to put another $1,500 in. And then down here, they're going to put another $1,500 in, and then again. And so you can see where this is going. What we've done in the past is we've actually typed 1,500 right there. And then we've built off of that going down. Like, for example, in a simple savings account, we would do things like, well, that equals that times 1.01 if we're doing 1% interest. And then we would drag that amount down. And that was our compounding interest on a single deposit. And that was fine for what it was. But the problem with an annuity is we need to be able to add amounts each time. Now, I can know what some of you are thinking. You can say, well, just do the addition in the formula. And I like that, but I want to show you something even slicker today. As a matter of fact, we're going to delete that $1,500 out of there. And I'm going to come over here to the side of the table. This is going to be our table. But I'm going to come over here to the side, and I'm actually just going to type deposit. And I'm going to put $1,500 here. And this might seem kind of weird, but I'm actually going to click in this cell and type equals and then click on that $1,500 right there. It might seem a little bit strange. But the reason for that is actually pretty cool, because what I want to do is I want to be able to change this number later to other numbers and have it change over here as well. And what's cool about that is once we use this cell throughout this table, we can change it here and it'll change all the way through the table. So I'm going to leave it at $1,500 for the time being, and then we're going to see where this goes to. Okay. Now, in the annuity, we also need an interest rate. So let's talk about an interest. Man, I'm having a hard time spelling today. Interest rate. And I'm going to space that, make it bold and italic, bold and underline. Maybe I'll capitalize the R, feeling saucy. Okay, and I don't know. Let's make it 1% for starters, 0.01 for 1%. Okay. And I want this to also be what's called a reference. In other words, I never want to type 0.01 over here because I want to be able to change that 0.01 every time I come down here. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to think through what the annuity is going to be. In year 1, the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to hit equals. This kiddo is going to deposit the $1,500. So I'm just going to click on I3. That is going to be an additional deposit. So to that, we now have to add last year's amount, but we have to apply the interest rate to it. Now watch this formula with me. If the interest rate is 0.01, you might be tempted to type 1.01, and you would not be wrong to do that. The problem with that is if we want to change the interest rate, if we type this as 1.01 and then drag that formula down, these .01s are going to be all throughout the table. We have to go change every single one of them. So rather than do that, I'm going to call this 1 plus, and then I'm going to click on that .01, and I'm going to press enter. I'm going to press the close parentheses. So let's just make sure we see what this formula is. I3 is the deposit amount. And we're going to have to see an I3 in every single one of these cells. So that I3 needs to be in every one of these cells. I'm going to skip over to I4 for a second. I4 is this rate, the savings rate that we're getting in the account. We're also going to have to see I4 in every single one of these cells. This E4 that's right here, we definitely want that to be the previous year's amounts. That's the similarity between an annuity and a compounded account, is that the current amount in year 1 has to look back at year 0. And that's where the E4 comes in, but it also has to create a new deposit here. Okay, I'm going to press enter, and hopefully this number doesn't surprise you too much. It's $3,015, and here's why. You deposited an additional $1,500 to the $1,500, but you also earned 1% on the $1,500. So 1% of $1,500 is 15, plus the original $1,500 plus the additional $1,500, which would be $3,015. Now that we've got this formula and it looks pretty gorgeous, you might be tempted to drag it down. Let's drag it to the next cell. And you look at that and you say to yourself, wait, time out. That's not right. That's not right at all. And you're correct. That's not right. This one was. But now look at this one. Now, remember what we said earlier. We need to see I3, which is the deposit amount, in each one of these cells going down. The problem is when you drag the cell down, remember how Excel works. Excel works by when you drag the cell, the references that you typed up here all increase by a number each time. So this I3 that's right here, when you drag it to the next cell, this one, it now says I4. And when you drag it to the next cell, this one now says I5. This one now says, you see what's going on, I7. And the same thing is happening over here. This one up here said I4, which is what we wanted. But then when we dragged it down, it became I5. Now, the E4, that's legit. We want E4 to change to E5 right here. So that E5 that's right there, that's totally fine. But the problem is we do not want the I3 and the I4 to change. The good news is there's a really simple fix to pin them at I3 and I4, and it's called an absolute reference. Right now, when you drag this formula and all those things change in each of the cells, that's called a relative reference. The formula changes its references relative to how far you drop it. We're going to change I3 and I4 to absolute references, and here's how we do that. We're going to highlight just I3. And on my Windows machine, I'm going to press the F4 button. This is my shortcut. When I do that, you see what happens? Dollar signs appear in front of the I and in front of the 3. You can also just type the dollar signs. That also works, but the F4 shortcut on my Windows machine is a nice one. Now, I'm going to leave the rest of the formula the way it is for right now to show you the effect that has. If I now drag it down, oh, that number's very different now, isn't it? Because you see how that I3 has now stayed I3 in the front? And no matter how much I drag it down, that I3 is always going to stay that I3 in the front. And that's what you want. You want that thing to have a repeated deposit. Okay, so far? All right, good. I'm going to delete all these other formulas here. Now, we also want the I4 to be pinned. So I'm going to highlight that and press F4 to make it absolute. And then if I drag it down, something cool happens. That formula right there is now correct. It's added $1,500 and it's taken 1.01 times the previous amount which is the new amount in the account. So it's doing exactly what it should do. It's taking 1.01, 101% of last year's amount, and then it's adding it to the 1,500. And now you can drag that puppy dog all the way down to 20 years. And what you can look at is, after 20 years, assuming that you did a deposit in year 20, which I'm making that assumption. So in other words, he gave one in year 0, and he also gave one in year 20. So technically speaking, it's 21 deposits. Now, what's really cool about having these over here is now you can change any one of them. For example, suppose you change this to 1,600, and it autofills the entire column of the amount in the annuity, because the entire formula is based on these cells over here and the reaction of it to year 0. You could change this back to 1,500, and you could change the savings account to 2% to see what happens. You could change it to 10% to see what happens. I'm going to have you doing this in the project, actually, to try these numbers out. So that's what's so cool about annuities and coding with absolute references. It allows you to actually get in there and see how to pin certain values and then let those certain values populate through the entire chart.